Family Matters, Kevin Petersen, Florida Gators stuff.
National championship. National champions.
What a crazy game. I enjoyed those types of games. So
Yeah,
I enjoyed I did not win my pool, but nonetheless, I enjoyed it.
I did win my pool, and I was in 3, and I enjoyed it. It was I couldn't believe they won. I like.
Did you keep the same picks in all 3 pools?
No, the one that I won in, I called it Kevin's second chance. The second chance did 99.5%, and I was like, well, that should have been my first chance. Oh man,
you're always better the second time around. Give me a second chance at anything, and I'm better. I'm still waiting on my second chance at life, but if I ever do, I'm probably on my 4th or 5th chance. So I shouldn't say that. So yeah, Kevin, how are we doing outside of
good? Life's good. Florida. Life's good. I'm in Florida. I'm going back to Colorado next week, so just doing a little back and forth action.
Get to know that flight pretty well, I would assume. So.
Oh yeah.
Family Matters. We do this pretty much every Thursday to the best of our ability. We answer questions and calm fears, calm anxiety, whatever it may be. So if you got any questions, fire them out. If you're watching live or watching replay, you can always put it in the comments or come to one of us directly. But let's get right into it, Kevin. Yeah. So, interesting question in the sense you have an adolescent that went through several wilderness treatment centers, kind of got back on his feet, 16, 17 years old. Fast forward 6 years from now, 6 years and, mid-20s. Mom and dad are a little worried that there was a lot of trouble in his adolescent years, got sober, and now just recently in the last year has started to drink, is not doing the drugs, which mom says got him in the trouble in the first place. Should we be worried, Kevin?
I think I'm going to surprise you with my answer. As much as I think harm reduction doesn't work, this is one of those places, one of those rare occasions where I think it's warranted. And here's why. Not every teenager that gets thrown into wilderness is a drug addict or an alcoholic. Sometimes they're just overindulging or classic self-medicating or
acting
out, behaving poorly, struggling with, being a teenager, which, oh my God, can you imagine? I mean, if there's anything I would never want to do again, it would be being a teenager. So I would say, I totally get where you're coming from. You feel like you probably rescued him from the depths of hell, and now he's kind of like dancing on the doorstep again. So here's what I would do. I'd just be super clear with him, like, hey, we're not comfortable with this. However, you're an adult and you get to make your own choices and your own decisions. If you're funding him on any level, I would say set up the parameters. If you're okay with him drinking a little bit, great. This might be a good situation where you have a sober link and just say, hey, we're not telling you not to drink. We just want to know how much you're drinking, because you're on our dime. If he's not on your dime, you really don't have there's not much you can do there. Other than saying, we love you and we're concerned. And we just want you to be careful with what you're doing. I would do regular drug testing because that's really the big concern, right? As he goes back into whatever he was into. So yeah, I think, one of the things I've noticed with guys in AA that get sober, like at 14, 15, 16, a lot of times it's because of consequences. It's from the judge, it's from the school, the family, and they're like, he's an alcoholic. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. But I mean, does he really know? And I'm not doubting them. I'm just saying at 16, I mean, some people are, there's no doubt about it, but I think there's a certain, I've met plenty of people that were like, I don't relate to what you guys are talking about. And they've gone on to have wonderful lives, And I've known other people that are like, I'm not an alcoholic. And then, a month later, they're like, oh, I'm an alcoholic. And it's like, so maybe okay, final thought. There's a thing called I know you know this, there's a thing called the Marty Mann test, and it's 2 drinks a day for 2 weeks and to see how it goes. And I want to be clear, it's 2 drinks, not 2 drinks. A day, and see how it goes. Because if he's truly an alcoholic, the drinks are going to kick in the phenomenon of craving, and he's going to, he's not going to survive the 2 weeks. If he's not, he's probably going to be like, yeah, I don't even want to do this. Forget it. And so that would be my only other thought. Now, all of this, of course, is contingent upon you having the leverage with them of saying, you're on our dime. But if you think he's drinking and it's out of control, or using drugs and it's out of control, go back to the original stuff from my book, Chronic Hope, and say, hey, we're going to do regular drug testing. You got to be self-supporting, and you got to be addressing your mental health and your issues. And if you're not, then the family is going to put up some walls. And you can just go back. I mean, literally, that's the thing. But my point being, sorry, I'm repeating myself, but my point being to this situation is, just because they went to treatment at 16 doesn't necessarily make them an addict or an alcoholic. I mean, a lot of people just get out of control and they get reined back in, and then they realize, yeah, I'm really not one of them, So that's my thought.
I'm interested, and I've heard this in numerous times. So I mean, just in general, like I would be curious to ask that individual, especially if you're, maybe 4 or 5 years of staying away from everything, and then all of a sudden, that sooner, like that day you decide to have a drink or whatever it may be. In this case, like if you start drinking and drugs, I mean, what made you pick up that drink? Because sounds like you passed the 21-year-old like test. Like sounds to me like this person 6 and 17, 5, 6 years later, she says, so you're past the 21. So it's not the legal drinking age. What was the decision? What was the thought why did you decide to pick up that drink? Because that would be a lot more telling to me as to, what are you doing? Recovery principles for 5, 6 years. And then, so I've always been curious with, people that went through adolescent treatment. I just spent, 2, 3, 4 days playing golf with someone that got sober, sober when he was 16 years old, and is, in his late 30s. And so he's kept at it and says like it's a life beyond my wildest dreams. But I couldn't imagine. I mean, there's a lot of people going to adolescent treatment. I'm with you. I just don't think that they're all addicts, alcoholics, but I would be curious as to that day that you decided to pick up an alcoholic drink after, say, 6 years. What was the thought process?
Yes, absolutely. And how are you drinking? Are you having a beer occasionally or 2 beers occasionally? Okay, no big deal. But if you're back at it, then okay, the experiment failed. So yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm utterly curious when people got sober 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, even 20, more power to you. I waited until I was 31. So, but I didn't go to adolescent treatment. I started going into treatment when I was like 19 or 20 or something like that, or somewhere in that area, 22 maybe. I think I was older than 21. So yeah, it was, but I was showing signs in college, 18, 19 years old. So I'm interested more in the thought process.
We're on the same page.
So much of the same lines when you're talking about with these parents are helping them out financially or anything like that. I think it's something I deal with a lot too. We've got another question about you have someone that's obviously showing signs, substance abuse, mental health, whatever it may be, but they're highly, highly successful on paper, making families continually ask, like, how do you step in or how do you handle someone that's obviously successful on paper, but is showing all the signs in his personal life that
Yeah.
Drugs and alcohol getting out of his life would be a good idea.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when people tell me, well, oh no, this is what the classic, they're a functioning alcoholic. And I'm like, well, okay, so let's take a step back and define alcoholic. Okay. There's no such thing as a functioning alcoholic. You can't be an alcoholic like you and me and be functioning. There's, you just because you go to work every day doesn't make you functioning. It just means that you're going to work every day. In the last year of my drinking, I went to the gym every day for 2 hours and I looked amazing, but I mean, I was a shell. Inside, I was a complete disaster. And so that's the thing I would sit down. If this is a loved one of mine or someone I care about, I would be like, hey, look, here are my concerns. You can't keep a relationship. You can't keep a friend. The family really doesn't want you around. And sure, you're making money and you're doing whatever you're doing, but we can't stand being around you. And that's the conversation I would have, because that's not functional. That's not a way to live. I think it's important to remember that going to work and making money doesn't make it okay. And I hear that, and I know you do too. I hear that all the time. And I'm like, that doesn't, we'll put that on his tombstone. God, he made a lot of money, and but that's really where you have to come at it from a position of empathy and compassion and love. And it's like, I can't do this. I can't be around you because of the lifestyle that you've chosen. And you just say, look, if you're going to choose to continue to go down that path, that's your choice. You're an adult, but that means you're going to do it without me. And that tends to wake them up, and they're like, well, what are you talking about? It's like, well, I can't be around that. I don't like it. It's not, and so that's how you start the conversation. Yeah.
Now there's family. I mean, you're setting healthy boundaries and so forth. And I think, if we could get families to start setting healthy boundaries and eliminating kind of the guilt and shame that they have with, putting these healthy boundaries, like, we get a lot of questions about, we're obviously talking about setting healthy boundaries. And so families, from my personal standpoint, they struggle with dealing with the guilt and whatever it may be. Like, hey, I can no longer be around you when you're drinking or using. And then, they do that with a loved one. And then there's obviously resentment and kind of, step back and so forth. And family members, I think, struggle with keeping those boundaries with that feeling, that guilt, like they're feeling like they're cutting out their loved one out of their lives. How do you, when you hear family members talk about the guilt of setting healthy boundaries, what do you kind of dive into with them?
I always, that's always the next thing. They're like, oh, but if I do what you're saying, they're going to get mad and they won't talk to me. I won't see the grandchildren. Yeah. I'm like, I totally understand what you're saying, and it makes perfect sense. But here's the question you have to ask yourself. If you're coming to me saying, hey, I feel like my loved one is putting themselves in danger and in harm's way, that has to be the priority. And also understand that by not doing anything, you're enabling them. You're making them, you're complicit with their choices and the way their lifestyle goes, because that means you're accepting it. So it's one of those moments where you have to say something, and you have to say, I'm sorry, I don't approve of the way you live, and I don't mean that in a super duper judgy way. I mean, I'm afraid you're going to die. I'm afraid this is going to end poorly. I certainly am not advocating going to someone and saying, I really don't like the friends you keep, or I don't like your girlfriend or your boyfriend. It's like, stop. And I get that a lot, What I say, what you can tell them is, I'm really concerned about your alcohol and drug use because I don't want you to die, and it's just that simple. And if they're not willing to go there, or they don't feel that way, then it's like, okay, that's cool. I'm not trying to force you to do anything. When you get there, you let me know.
Yeah.
Because that's the impetus. That's what's going to motivate them.
Well, nothing, evaporates, progress or change than evaporating boundaries. Like if you're throwing in these boundaries out and then 2 weeks later, just, what do you mean? Oh, that was 2 weeks ago. Don't worry about it. We, as an addict, I can switch into the addict and alcoholic phase. This is what we survive on. I always knew my mom, dad, family, they were upset. They were going to say some things, but they really never truly followed through until, shockingly, I decided, like when they started and I was like, I think they mean it this time. That brought about change within me. And here I am still 16 years sober, not because I didn't get sober because of all family. I had to do it for myself, but shutting down those boundaries. And I always tell families, like, if you're going to say it, mean it, like follow through with it, like, or otherwise don't say it, because we know, like an addict, alcoholic, whatever it may be, we know when they're not going to follow through on it. Oh, they say that all the time. Give it a couple of weeks. I call back mom and dad, they bail me out. So
I had the same experience when they went in August of 1990 when they decided to play hardball. I was like, oh, this again. Yeah. Okay. We'll see how long this goes. Oh, okay. Sure. And the difference was they stuck to it, and they stuck to it for like 6 weeks. So we got through September and halfway through October. And I was like, what the hell's going on here? This is a whole new tact and I don't like this because they're not talking to me and they won't hang out with me. And I'm not okay with that. And so I called my mom and I was like, well, you guys don't love me. And she's like, oh, we love you. We just don't want you to die. I'm like, all right, what do I got to do to get back in the family? And she's like, you got to start going to therapy with your dad. And I was like, no problem. I've been twirling those people around for years, and this time they brought in, a freaking Jedi, right? He was just waiting for me. and he'll just let me, he was great, man. He let me barf it all out and just blah, 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 blah. And then it's kind of like, I would barf it all out. And then he and my dad and I, the three of us, would stand back and look at it together. And they'd be like, huh, what does this all have in common? You and drugs and alcohol. That's it. And I'm like, oh, goddamn, you're right. And that worked, right? Now, I didn't quit till May. There was still part of me. It was like, no, I can figure this out. But when the evidence got to be so pure, I was just like, I'm with you. I got it. So that's how we roll.
Longtime Dallas guy that I grew up in the rooms with would always say, like, let's analyze your throw up. Like, all right, you threw up, and then instead of just saying, hey, I threw up, let's go through what exactly was part of it. Was it something you ate? Whatever it is. But what he was saying was, like, throw up in counseling or in the rooms, but also take a look at what's causing that throw up and, self-will, what behaviors, whatever it may be. And it gets me, so I just came back with a bunch of people in the industry. We were sitting in Arizona and, staying at a casino, and this brought up so many, because I'm seeing more and more families talk about gambling addiction and so forth. And they may or may not have substance abuse. And they're like, well, at times he drinks too much or whatever it may be. But, when we say substance abuse, we normally always talk about drugs, alcohol. There's other addictions out there that change the way that you feel. And for me, being there, and I love to gamble, and there was a large portion of my recovery that had to deal with changing the way that I felt, which through sex, through gambling, obviously through drugs and alcohol. But there's other addictions out there. Like, you see it all too often. We're talking about people that maybe went through wilderness treatment or adolescent treatment, got sober. There's other ways to change the way you feel outside of drugs and alcohol, and families need to know that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then, then here's the truth too. All roads lead to Rome. So, if it's shopping, if it's porn, if it's actual sex, if it's gambling, if it's, making money or whatever, they all lead back to the same space. That's addiction. And they really, and I get that exactly what you're saying. And it's funny how we opened up the show today talking about March Madness pools.
Yeah.
But I want to be clear, it was $20. So it's, I wasn't throwing the house on it, although now I wish I had, but no, I'm kidding. I remember actually when I was still drinking, and even sober, going to Tahoe and going to the casinos and Vegas and just being like, yeah, I can't do this. This is gonna, I'm already feeling it all. I'm already like, ooh, it's the combo pack of, I could get rich. I could make it, baby. And then the other 90% of me are like, this is such a bad idea. You don't even have to call your sponsor. This is a bad idea.
Yeah.
You need to leave now. And I'm like, yep, you're right. I got to go. Where's the free buffet?
Well, early in my recovery, I still remember we're on the golf course with a couple other guys that, that I looked up to, obviously in recovery, but so I think we were playing for $5 or something, and I shifted into gear, didn't even realize it. And, we're done with the round, we're having lunch afterwards. And one of the guys goes, I'll just say it, like, I did not appreciate or have fun with, playing with you today, Jay. Like, you turned into a different person. And reality was like, this was $5. It could be, the number is irrelevant, and I had to take a look at, absolutely. Like, looking back on it, I shifted into this gear. That $5 I basically said, like, this is going to take away all my problems. Like, I'm not, refuse to look at the issues going at hand. And if I win this $5, like, life will have new meaning. And I was just miserable to play with. And so that's what these other addictions can creep up with. Families are stepping in and saying, I don't want to be around you. And it's not having to do drugs or alcohol. And I'm talking about $5, gambling. My character defects were on full display chasing $5. So.
Yep. And that's all the evidence we need. So.
Yeah. So families, we go on and on. I think this is a good place to it's a hefty kind of topic, but I think it kind of wraps everything up. You see it, we get questions, why is this time going to be different? Families are doing, a lot of things earlier. The first question was, they sent them to numerous adolescent treatments, and families have all these things. They're calling us and said, here's the laundry list of all the things we've done, treatment, clinical, whatever it is. Like, why is this time going to be, families, I think, are getting worn out with all the help. But I think, to answer my own question, I think it has come down to what we always talk about. If they're not changing, the person's not going to change. So they may be throwing money and all this other things. Tells me the family has refused to change through the whole process.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. You got it.
So. Well, alrighty. We talked guilt. We talked about kind of process addictions. We kind of covered everything else, I think. So anything to wrap up the best show no one's heard of?
Well, I think we're going to try and change that. I think something big is going to happen here. We'll just leave it at that. I think something big is coming down the road for the Family Matters. So.
Oh, you don't even tell me about these things, but I like it. I'm hooked.
For all 5 of our viewers, I think they're gonna find something, that changes in the near future.
Jesus. Well, Kevin, always a pleasure. Keep the questions coming. I get it all the time. You probably get this question all the time. If it's new to you, it's new to us. So if you need to ask a question, send them in. Don't think that it's already been asked 100 times, because if you feel the need to ask it, it's new to you, so it's new to us. So keep them coming. So, Kevin, always a pleasure. Enjoy your Florida win. It goes away quick. So
chomp.